In this module, learners will explore the learning theories and instructional design frameworks commonly found in the field. They will begin to develop a foundational understanding of the field for practical application in the future. Learners will also explore the need to develop a context of learning in order to better serve the clients, users, or students in their learning environments. This video is broken up into 4 parts. Part 1, an introduction to instructional design. Part 2, the learning theories behind many instructional design in integrating technology practices. Part 3, the industry frameworks used in the field. And Part 4, knowing your learner, understanding the context of learning. Reiser and Dempsey defined instructional design as a systematic process that is employed to develop education and training programs in a consistent and reliable fashion. The authors of your textbook defined instructional designer as somebody who works with clients to translate their needs and desires into the design specifications that will yield a successful product. Starting back during World War II, instructional design was a massive field. Nowadays, corporations, higher education, and K-12 institutions are the chief areas in need of instructional designers. Many learning theorists and theories have been developed that heavily influence both instructional design and technology integration. Over the past 50 years, there have been several dominant theories or theorists of learning. Each has implications on not only learning, but on the use of technology and media. First is behaviorism. Behaviorism is a worldview that assumes a learner is essentially passive, responding to environmental stimuli. The learner starts off as a clean slate, and behavior is shaped through positive and negative reinforcement. Learning is therefore defined as a change in behavior in the learner. Skinner and Pavlov are amongst the seminal thinkers in this theory. In the context of technology and media usage, the collaboration, communication, and creativity going on during learning with technology obviously affect the behavior of the learner. Next is Cognitivism, which is a learning theory that focuses on the processes involved in learning rather than on the observed behavior. As opposed to behaviorists, cognitivists do not require an outward exhibition of learning, but focus more on the internal processes and connections that take place during learning. In essence, the human brain is a processor of information. Technology and media provide information and virtual experiences for the brain to process. Brunner and Gagné were the leading theorists in this camp. Building upon the theory of cognitivism, Constructivism examined and explored the engagement learners experienced during real-world authentic applications, shifting from passive consumption of information to active acquisition of knowledge through problem-solving, creativity, and discovery. In essence, learners create their own interpretations of their experiences and the world around them and build upon previously acquired knowledge. Piaget is the main theorist behind Constructivism. In the context of technology and learning, digital tools and resources provide information and real-world authentic experiences to learners. Finally is Constructivism, developed by Seymour Papert, a pupil of Piaget's, builds upon constructivist views of learners building knowledge through new experiences and building upon previously acquired knowledge. It extends the theory by identifying new learning is most effective when a part of the process involves constructing a meaningful product. Technology, media, and the maker movement embrace this theory because evidence of learning is easy to build and share with an audience. Some integral theorists involved with 21st century pedagogy and technology. Jean-Jacques Rousseau was an 18th century Genevan philosopher, writer, and composer. He believed in the goodness of children and demonstrated that children can develop by letting them freely explore and learn. Pestalozzi was a 19th century Swiss pedagogue and educational reformer. He argued children should learn through activity and through things. He wanted to establish a psychological method of instruction that was in line with the laws of human nature. As a result, he placed a special emphasis on spontaneity and self-activity. Children should not be given ready-made answers, but should arrive at answers themselves. Froebel was a German pedagogue, a student of Pestalozzi, who laid the foundation for modern education based on the recognition that children have unique needs and capabilities. He created the concept of kindergarten and learning objects for the young. Dewey was a 20th century American philosopher, psychologist, and educational reformer. He believed continued experiences helped shape the attitudes and dispositions of the learner. Experiences, both good and bad, led to cognitive growth, and the continuity in these events eventually led to the formation of a habit. In Dewey's vision of situational learning, the students and their experiences are the primary focus of learning. Every student has the right to experience learning, participate in instruction, and cultivate essential skills for their futures. Piaget was a Swiss philosopher and the creator of the Constructivist theory, which states that people produce knowledge and form meaning based upon their experiences. The role of teachers is very important. Instead of giving a lecture, teachers function as facilitators whose role is to aid the student when it comes to their understanding. Freire was a Brazilian educationalist. He has left a significant mark on thinking about progressive educational practices. He created the pedagogy of the oppressed, which examined how learners were often left with very little power. Freire proposes a reciprocal relationship between the teacher and the students in a democratic environment that allows everyone to learn from each other. Technology and media provides methods that can empower learners with information and choice. John Dewey, one of the most influential U.S. philosophers and educational reformers, believed in democracy and experiential learning, or learning by doing. Dewey argued that curriculum should be relevant to students' lives. He saw learning by doing and developmental and practical life skills as crucial to their futures. Finally, there was Seymour Papert, who was the creator of the Constructionism, who believed in developing that students should show evidence of their learning through creating meaningful artifacts. Here's some critical vocabulary and terms for technology instruction. Pedagogy, which is the art and science of technology. Direct instruction refers to instructional approaches that are structured, sequenced, and led by teachers. Instructional scaffolding is a process through which a teacher adds supports for students in order to enhance learning and aid in the mastery of tasks. Rubrics are an evaluation tool or set of guidelines used to promote the consistent application of learning expectations, objectives, and learning standards in the classroom. Project-based learning is a teaching method in which students learn by actively engaging in real-world and personally meaningful projects. Product-based learning is the process by which students learn the content by doing a project. Students then share their application of their core content knowledge and skills via authentic product. Real-world application, new information skills are applied to authentic real-world situations during the learning process. Scenario-based learning uses interactive scenarios to support active learning strategies such as problem-based or case-based learning. It normally involves students working their way through a storyline or narrative, usually based around an ill-structured or complex problem, which they are required to solve. Finally, student-centered learning refers to a wide variety of educational programs, experiences, and approaches, and academic support strategies that are intended to address the distinct learning needs, interests, aspirations, or cultural backgrounds of individual students and groups of students. Continuing with critical vocabulary. Discovery learning is an inquiry-based constructivist learning theory that takes place in problem-solving situations, where the learner draws on his or her own past experience and existing knowledge to discover facts and relationships and new truths to be learned. Next is the theory of multiple intelligences, which differentiates human intelligence into specific modalities. These types of intelligences include visual spatial, verbal linguistic, logical mathematical, bodily kinesthetic, interpersonal, intrapersonal, and naturalistic. Standard-based instruction is a teacher method that is based on standards or skill mastery. Facilitator is a teacher who does not operate under the traditional concept of teaching, but rather is meant to guide and assist students in learning for themselves. Collaborative learning involves students working in pairs or small groups to discuss concepts or find solutions to problems. Instructional strategies are techniques teachers use to help students become independent, strategic learners. These strategies become learning strategies when students independently select the appropriate ones and use them effectively to accomplish tasks or meet goals. Assessment refers to the wide variety of methods or tools that educators use to evaluate, measure, and document the academic readiness, learning progress, skill acquisition, or educational needs of students. And finally, there's Bloom's Taxonomy, which is a classification system used to define and distinguish different levels of human cognition, i.e., thinking, learning, and understanding. Educators have typically used Bloom's taxonomy to inform and guide the development of assessments or curriculum, such as units, lessons, projects, or learning activities. The SAMR model is a framework created by Dr. Ruben Pentadura that categorizes 4 different degrees of classroom technology integration. Letters SAMR stands for substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition. The SAMR model was created to share a common language across disciplines as teachers strive to help students visualize complex concepts. Bloom's taxonomy is a series of cognitive skills and learning objectives arranged in a hierarchical model. Each step of the pyramid from bottom to top represents a move from a lower order thinking skill to a higher order one, from straightforward concrete cognition to a more abstract conceptual understanding. Bloom's taxonomy is a great tool for helping teachers to develop higher order critical thinking abilities in students. Referring to the taxonomy's concepts during the planning process helps teachers to focus in on appropriate objectives for groups and individuals, and to plan for their progression in the short, medium, and longer term. The taxonomy provides a clear framework or system of organization for classifying lesson objectives, as well as a coherent starting point to build lessons from. In Part 2, we explored the learning theories, theorists, or models of technology integration. Now in Part 3, we are going to focus on systems of instructional design. After all, lessons, training, online modules, etc. work as systems, components working together to create a whole. The ADDIE model relies on each stage being done in the given order, but with a focus on reflection and iteration. The model gives you a streamlined, focused approach that provides feedback for continuous improvement. Step 1 is analysis. You analyze the current situation in terms of training, knowledge gaps, etc. You start with a series of questions to understand the current situation and to also understand what is the goal of the training itself. This influences a huge amount of decisions later in the process. One very common question is, what is the point of the lesson? What type of behavioral change is desired? This phase should be a full audit of the audience goals, training methodologies used, media types used, etc. Once this is done, you can generate a course or training plan that addresses the who, what, when, where, and how. Step 2 is design. With your plan done, You then get to the design phase. This is where you take all of the learnings of the previous phase and use it to make practical decisions. This includes a strategy, delivery method, structure, duration, assessment, and feedback. The next step is to storyboard your ideas or to create prototypes. Step 3 is development. At this stage, you can begin to create the courses. You will be heavily guided by the prototype and storyboards at this point. Each element of the course should be developed to match the design phase. The core of the content has already been decided. All you need to add is a level of detail and polish to the course. The development process should be iterative, meaning that you can change it from here to there, fix mistakes, or make improvements. Step 4 is implementation. Once you have completed your course and you are satisfied and it is fully tested, it's time to share it with the learner. Step 5 is the evaluation. ADDI's main goal is to provide a structured method of creating instructional programs. It is also, however, a powerful model for improving the way in which future iterations are created. Getting feedback on every aspect of the course is really important so that you can improve and revise the content. Dick and Carey developed this comprehensive and detailed process in 1978. It is composed of 10 components as shown in the chart. Component 1, identify instructional goals. Describe what the learners are expected to perform at the end of the instruction. Instructional goals are normally broad statements of what you are trying to accomplish. They should describe what the learner should perform, not what you are going to do. Number 2, conduct instructional analysis. Identify the exact performance gap between the present performance and the desired outcome. This informs you what the learners need to learn in order to perform. Step 3, identify entry behaviors. Identify the general characteristics of the learners, including skills, experience, motivation levels, and basic demographics, which relate to the skills and topics that will be taught. This information should have enough detail to allow you to identify the correct starting point of the instruction so that they do not waste time reviewing material they already know, or it doesn't become too difficult if they don't know it. The goal is to start the learning process at a level they already understand so you can scaffold the instruction and provide structure so that they can build upon it. Step 4, write performance objectives. Performance objectives consist of a description of the task or skills to be learned, the standards or criteria, and the condition that the task must be performed. Next is develop assessment instruments. Tests and evaluations are created that will ensure the learners meet the necessary prerequisites for performing the new skills, identify the learner's progress in meeting the performance objectives during the learning process, and 3, evaluate the learning process itself to ensure it is structurally sound. Next is to develop instructional strategies. Create a blueprint of the learning activities that will transfer, develop, and reinforce the skills and knowledge formulated in the performance objectives. Next is develop and select instructional materials. Using the blueprint created in the previous steps, fully develop the instructional content and activities to save time, reuse existing material whenever possible, or find some. Next is design and conduct formative evaluation. Use iterative design methods such as prototypes, small field group trials, and/or interviews with prospective learners so that you can collect data to identify areas in the instructional material that need improvement before releasing it either for the first time or again. Next is design and conduct summative evaluation. Judge the worthiness of the entire program. Finally, revise instruction. Use the data from the 2 types of evaluations, formative and summative, to construct an understanding. Did the course work? Did it need to be updated or changed in any way? Assure is an instructional design model that has the goal of producing more effective teaching and learning. Assure is an acronym that stands for the various steps. A is for analyze learners and learner characteristics. The first S is for state objectives. The second S is for select, modify, or design materials. The U stands for to utilize the materials. The R stands for require learner response. And finally, the E stands for evaluation, both the student and the teacher. Gagne's 9 steps of instruction. Step 1. Gain attention of the students. Ensure the learners are ready to learn and participate in activities by presenting a stimulus to capture their attention. Step 2. Inform students of the objectives. Step 3. Stimulate recall of prior learning. Help students make sense of new information by relating it to something they already know or something they have already experienced. Step 4. Present the content. Use strategies to present lesson content to provide more effective instruction. Organize and group content in meaningful ways and provide explanations after demonstrations. Step 5. Provide learning guidance. Advise students of strategies to aid them in learning content and of resources available for them to use. In other words, help students learn how to learn. 6. Elicit performance or practice. Have students apply what they have learned to reinforce new skills and knowledge. Step 7. Provide feedback. Provide timely feedback of students' performance to assess and facilitate learning, and to allow students to identify gaps in understanding before it is too late. Step 8. Assess performance. Test whether the expected learning outcomes have been achieved on previously stated course objectives. And finally, step 9, enhance retention and transfer. Help learners retain more information by providing them opportunities to connect concepts to potential real-world applications. SAM, which stands for Successive Approximation Model, serves as an iterative design and delivery model to meet the immediate demands of clients or educational institutions. SAM starts with the preparation phase, where background information is gathered, such as what style of training works best for the organization, who needs to acquire which skills, and what are the constraints and opportunities. This is intended to be a very quick phase, as all design proposals will be double-checked as the process moves forward. In the second, iterative phase, the goal is to design and prototype the material so that it can be evaluated by the interested parties. The logic here is that it is easier to give feedback and evaluate a product that exists rather than one that is only an idea and allows for more extensive review and testing. In the final iterative development phase, the finished prototype is fully developed and implemented. Once it has been used, it has been evaluated and run back through development and implementation phases if necessary. Part 4 explores how educators and instructional designers must completely understand the needs of their clients. In learning contexts, this would be students, learners, or trainees. As stated on page 31 of your course book, key to design thinking is to develop an empathic understanding of the end user. For instructional designer or teacher, this is the learner. The learning objectives, learning activities, and assessment strategies must all center on the needs of the learner. As an instructional designer, one of the most important tasks is to advocate for the learner during every phase of the instructional design process. First, a needs assessment must be done. This identifies the gaps that needs addressed during the learning process. This can be conducted in many ways and during all steps of whatever model you are using for design. From this needs analysis, you want to develop learner characteristics to establish a context for learning. For instance, who are your learners? What is the learning environment? What community does this course serve? Understanding learner characteristics is helpful for determining the instructional tools and materials needed for learner success. The context for learning informs the instructional designer about the particular teaching circumstances, such as institutional demographics, block scheduling, and lengths of class periods. Attention to students' backgrounds, interests, and needs are needed. How many students will be in the class? How many males? How many females? What is the age range or grade levels of the students? What prior knowledge, skills, and academic background do students bring to the lesson? How do you know this? What additional needs might students have? Describe cultural or socioeconomic groups whose unique needs should be considered and or exceptional learning needs. After your module readings have been completed and you have explored all the resources, please take the Module 1 quiz. The content of the quiz includes content from the first 2 chapters of your course text, key terminology from the video and from readings, the Stanford's D School Model of Design Thinking, ADDIE, SAMR, SAM, and the Dick and Carey Model, Bloom's Taxonomy, and Gagne's 9 steps of instruction. Good luck.